Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into something truly fundamental. How getting involved in our communities, especially when we're young, shapes not just our understanding of the world, but our core sense of right and wrong and, our role as active citizens.
hmm
We've gathered a fascinating collection of sources for you, from long-term studies on the impact of youth activism to, well, deeply moving accounts of individuals who risked their lives to rescue Jewish people during World War II, and even an insightful look at a community service program for inner-city minority youth.
Yeah,
Our mission really is to uncover how these everyday actions and experiences can plant the seeds for a profound sense of morality and responsibility within us, going far beyond just like knowing something intellectually to truly embodying it.
that's right. It's about how we internalize these values and how they become part of, well, who we are. It's interesting to think back to those debates in the 1990s about whether community service should be a standard part of the school
Oh,
curriculum.
yeah, I remember that.
The reasons people put forward were so varied, you know,
Hmm.
ranging from building basic patriotism to fostering critical selling about our democracy.
It's striking, though, when you look back at those debates, how little attention was actually given to the long-term impact of these early experiences. Adolescence is such a crucial period for shaping our identities, right?
Absolutely.
And yet the conversations seem to overlook a significant body of research on how these youthful engagements can influence us years, even decades down the
And
line.
that long-term influence is precisely what's so compelling. We have several longitudinal studies, meaning they followed the same individuals over many years, some for as long as, wow, 30 years.
30 years, that's significant.
Yeah. These studies reveal some really powerful connections between what young people do and the kind of political and moral behavior they exhibit as adults.
Okay, let's dig into some of those findings then. For instance, Barber and Eccles found that 10th graders who participated in pro-social activities, things like volunteering or being involved in, say, religious groups, were less likely to engage in delinquent behaviors like drug and alcohol use by the time they were seniors.
Yeah. That suggests a pretty direct positive influence, doesn't it?
It does.
And Johnson and colleagues discovered that high school volunteers were not only more likely to keep volunteering 4 years after they graduated, but they also demonstrated a stronger overall inclination towards, pro-social behavior.
Interesting.
This indicates that the habit of helping others, once it's established, it tends to stick around. So a key takeaway here is that these early pro-social engagements can really lay the groundwork for a more service-oriented life.
And it's not just about individual acts of service, is it? I mean, Bean and his team looked at adults who had been involved in a town planning project during their senior year of high school. 30 years later, these individuals were more likely to be members of local voluntary associations compared to their peers who hadn't done that. That really highlights how early engagement can foster a lasting connection to community involvement.
Exactly. And Ladwig and Thomas observed a similar pattern with former members of 4-H. 25 years later, they were not only more likely to belong to voluntary associations, but also to hold leadership positions within those organizations.
Leadership, too.
Yeah.
Okay.
This suggests that early participation can also cultivate a sense of civic leadership that lasts well into adulthood.
We also see this link extending to broader political participation.
Yeah.
Hanks and Eklund and Otto, in a separate study, both found that individuals who were involved in high school government or clubs were more likely to join voluntary associations and, importantly, to vote as adults even 15 years later. Furba and his colleagues confirmed this, identifying prior involvement in high school government as a strong predictor of both adult voting and membership in various associations. So it seems even seemingly small roles in student government can have a pretty significant impact on long-term civic engagement.
If we connect this to the bigger picture,
Yeah.
the powerful insight here is that it's not just one specific type of activity, but like a whole range of early engagements that appears to plant the seeds for a lifetime of community involvement and civic responsibility. But it gets even more interesting when we consider youth who are involved in more intensive forms of activism.
Right. The research on individuals who participated in the civil rights, free speech, and anti-war movements is really compelling, isn't it? DeMartini's analysis of multiple studies showed that those who were active in these movements as young adults tended to be more politically active and engaged as adults, even like 3 to 25 years later.
Yeah, and McAdams' work on the Mississippi Freedom Summer Project is particularly noteworthy. Even when comparing participants to individuals who were approved to participate but ultimately didn't go.
Oh, that's a good comparison group.
Exactly. He found that the participants remained more politically active decades later, often becoming involved in a variety of other social causes.
So what's significant about these findings?
Well, it's that these connections hold true across a really diverse spectrum of youth activities, and researchers often used comparison groups, like you said, to account for potential pre-existing differences.
Okay.
While it's impossible to control for every single factor, the evidence strongly suggests that the act of participating in these activities itself can be a really important precursor to future civic engagement. So it's not just that certain types of people get involved. The involvement itself seems to have a shaping effect.
That makes sense. It makes you think about what we consider to be moral behavior in our daily lives, doesn't it? This active concern for and involvement in community well-being, it's a form of everyday, kind of non-heroic morality, as one of our sources describes it. It's evident in adults simply choosing to join those voluntary associations that are working towards the common good.
And this youthful engagement isn't happening in isolation, right? As the research points out, these activities are often supported by organizations with specific religious, political, or other ideological viewpoints.
Right.
When young people get involved, they are exposed to these traditions, and this provides them with opportunities to really explore and develop their own identities within these historical narratives, which, as Erickson theorized, is so crucial during adolescence.
Yeah, finding your place.
Exactly. So these activities provide not just something to do, but a framework for understanding the world and their place in it. Now that we've seen the long-term effects of youth activism, maybe we should delve into the more fundamental aspects of moral identity by looking at some truly extraordinary examples.
You're right. Let's turn to the incredible stories of individuals who rescued Jewish people during World War II. What's striking is the underlying perspective that drove their actions.
What's fascinating here is how these rescuers viewed the people they were helping. Alliner, as well as Moreau and Epperson, both found that these individuals overwhelmingly saw Jews as fellow human beings, deserving of the same rights and privileges as anyone else in their community.
Just fellow humans.
Right. This stood in stark contrast to the non-rescuers who tended to view Jews as outsiders as fundamentally different. So, at its core, it was about recognizing a shared humanity.
The quotes from the rescuers are so incredibly powerful. Simple statements like, to respect all human beings, or, the straightforward act of offering shelter and bread to someone in desperate need who appears at your door in the middle of the night. It really underscores this deeply ingrained belief in our common humanity.
Absolutely. Tony, a member of the Dutch resistance interviewed by Monroe and Epperson, articulated this beautifully. He said, "When you save your fellow man, you save yourself too," and emphasized the fundamental interconnectedness of people, suggesting that you should always treat others as you would want to be treated.
Wow.
He even extended this sense of shared humanity to the Nazis, viewing them not as some separate monstrous entity, but as ordinary people who, under different circumstances, could be anyone. That's a really profound level of empathy.
It truly is. And it stands in stark contrast to the perspective of someone like Kurt, a non-rescuer interviewed in the same study, who even decades after the war still maintained a clear distinction between Germans and other groups, highlighting a persistent sense of us versus them.
Yeah, that distinction remained. This leads Monroe and Epperson to propose that ethical actions actually originate from these very deep-seated, often unconscious dispositions about how we relate to other people.
So not just conscious decisions.
Right. They argue that our identity, in this sense, isn't something we deliberately construct as much as it's revealed through countless daily social interactions. Alliner support this, suggesting that moral life isn't defined by making a single grand decision in a crisis, but rather by the accumulation of continuous small habits in our everyday lives.
Small habits.
Yeah. So it's the consistent practice of respect and consideration that builds a moral foundation.
It really boils down to how you fundamentally see yourself in relation to others. And this brings us to the Soup Kitchen study conducted by Eunice and Yates, which provides a really insightful look at how direct experience can shape these fundamental relationships of respect in a more contemporary and, well, everyday setting.
Right. What's particularly interesting about this study is the context. It involved inner-city minority youth participating in a soup kitchen as part of a religion class that focused on social justice.
Okay.
The high school was Catholic, but the students came from diverse religious backgrounds, and the teachers openly held liberal viewpoints. It was a very specific and intentionally designed environment to explore these issues.
And the impact of this direct experience was quite significant, wasn't it? Over half of the students actually chose to volunteer more than the required number of visits.
Yeah, which suggests genuine engagement.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And their essays and group discussions revealed a real shift in their perspectives over the course of the program.
For sure. Many students initially held negative stereotypes about homeless individuals, using labels like dirty, lazy, or drug-crazed. However, through their direct interactions, by serving them food and engaging in conversations, they began to see them as individuals with their own unique stories and their own inherent humanity. They started to connect homelessness to broader societal issues like poverty and the lack of affordable housing.
Right, seeing the system.
Yeah. Some students even experienced a shift in their own self-perception, beginning to see themselves as potentially having a political voice and the capacity to address these problems in the future. This is a powerful example of how direct contact can break down barriers and foster empathy.
The examples of these evolving viewpoints are really telling. The female student who reflected on how the hardships of living on the streets could negatively impact anyone's mental state and connected it to her own frustrations with minor daily inconveniences. That's a powerful moment of recognizing shared vulnerability, isn't it?
It is. And the small, everyday humanizing interactions were crucial. The homeless individuals thanking the students, showing genuine interest in their lives, even offering them advice, these seemingly minor exchanges, really blurred the lines between the students and those they were serving and challenged the students' preconceived notions.
Yeah.
The personal stories that were shared, the man with the Syracuse sweatshirt, the woman longing for her missing daughter, the man simply wanting a shower. These made the abstract issue of homelessness very real and personal for the students.
And the shared demographics likely played a role in fostering this recognition of shared humanity, didn't they? Many of the homeless individuals they encountered were also young and Black, just like the students themselves.
That's a good point.
This may have created a sense of shared experience, perhaps even a fear that they themselves could one day face similar circumstances, especially given their classroom discussions where they drew parallels between the homeless individuals and their own relatives or neighbors who had experienced unemployment or incarceration.
Right. It's in these everyday interactions. Even something as seemingly simple as a discussion about whether to give money to panhandlers, that we witness the development of compassion. The students were actively grappling with different perspectives, trying to understand the complexities of the situation and empathize with the individuals involved.
Yeah.
So through these direct experiences, respect for individuals begins to take root. Now, let's look at how this sense of respect can extend beyond individual interactions to encompass the broader community.
Okay, that's the second fundamental element of moral identity our sources highlight, extending respect from individual encounters to the wider community. And the historical examples here are truly inspiring.
What's particularly striking are the instances of entire communities acting on this principle. The Huguenot and Dutch Calvinist congregations during World War II who actively protected Jewish people, even across significant religious differences, their motivation wasn't solely based on personal kindness towards individuals. No, it stemmed from a deep sense of communal duty and a fundamental belief in the equal rights of all citizens. They viewed the act of not protecting their Jewish neighbors as a profound betrayal of the very foundations upon which their communities were built.
Wow, a betrayal of their community.
Yeah. This highlights how a shared belief system can drive collective moral action.
And these weren't isolated acts of individual bravery, were they?
Not at all. These were highly organized collective efforts involving providing food, safe housing, and communication networks, all supported by shared religious beliefs and strong community leadership. It really underscores how deeply ingrained this sense of responsibility was within these communities.
Denmark's national response to the Nazi persecution is another incredibly powerful example of this principle in action, isn't it?
Absolutely. As a democratic nation founded on the core value of equality, the government and the vast majority of its citizens largely refused to comply with the Nazi demands to identify and surrender their Jewish population. To do so would have been to fundamentally betray the core tenets of their political system and their national identity.
Yeah.
We see similar motivations in the actions of Polish nuns who shelter Jewish children, driven by the core Christian commandment of love for one's neighbor, even at tremendous personal risk to themselves.
And this connects back to the soup kitchen study in a really interesting way, doesn't it? We saw those students beginning to envision themselves in future roles where they could wield political power to address the very social issues they were witnessing firsthand, things like access to housing and education.
Absolutely. That moment when the female student at the HUD rally questioned her own future willingness to take a moral stand, that's a really significant step in recognizing the ongoing nature of this commitment to the broader community.
Hmm.
And the students connecting their future roles to their own family's participation in the civil rights struggle demonstrates a developing sense of responsibility that extends beyond the present moment, seeing themselves as part of a larger historical movement towards a more just society.
Right, like carrying the torch.
Exactly. So this sense of responsibility expands from individual interactions to a broader understanding of their role within the community and society as a whole.
So it seems that developing a strong moral compass isn't just about intellectual reasoning or abstract principles, but it's deeply interwoven with our sense of who we are and our place within a community. The research on individuals known for their exceptional moral behavior really reinforces this idea.
Yeah, what's particularly revealing is that studies of these moral exemplars often show that they aren't necessarily individuals with a uniquely advanced capacity for moral reasoning, at least not in the way traditional philosophical theories might suggest.
Really? Not higher reasoners.
Well, not necessarily. Instead, they frequently justify their actions based on deeply ingrained social norms and the core values of their moral community. It's about what is considered right
Yeah.
and expected within their social fabric.
Okay, right. The direct quotes from the rescuers we discussed earlier really bring this point home. Simple, profound statements like, I cannot give you any reason. It was not a question of reasoning. There were people in need and we helped them, or we helped people who were in need. Who they were was absolutely immaterial to us.
Yeah.
It wasn't some complex ethical calculation. It was a fundamental sense of duty and an inherent response to human suffering.
Right. Monroe and Efferson argue that ethical action fundamentally stems from how we perceive ourselves in relation to others. This self-perception essentially defines the range of choices we even see as available to us, both practically and morally.
Mm-hmm.
Tony's powerful quote, "What I did is what everybody normally should be doing. We live in one world. We are one people. Basically, we are all the same," perfectly illustrates this inclusive sense of self in relation to a broader humanity.
So these rescuers operated with a very broad and inclusive definition of who is considered human and worthy of respect, and this understanding was deeply embedded in their community identity, rather than being solely a personal, isolated choice.
Exactly. And this everyday morality, it appears, develops from these repeated habitual actions, these small acts of respect, kindness, and engagement, until it becomes an integral part of who we are, making those moral responses feel almost spontaneous and natural.
And that's where the crucial connection to youth service becomes so clear. By providing young people with concrete opportunities to engage in these moral behaviors, to actively practice acting with respect, compassion, and a sense of responsibility, they begin to see themselves as effective moral actors in the world. This repeated engagement helps to solidify morality not just as an idea, but as a core component of their developing identity.
Yeah, you practice being that person. This leads us to the developmental link between taking action and forming our identity.
Yeah.
Blasey argued that morality is fundamentally about the kind of person one is, not just their ability to reason through ethical dilemmas.
Right.
And Davidson and Eunice built upon this, suggesting that moral actions actually pave the way for the development of a moral identity, which then, in turn, fosters even more moral actions. It becomes a self-reinforcing cycle.
A positive feedback loop, exactly. Hart and Fegley found that adolescent moral exemplars young people recognize for their strong moral character have a much closer alignment between their ideal self, the person they aspire to be, and their real self, the person they actually are.
Right.
The rescuer's simple response, "What else could I do?" when asked about their courageous actions, really speaks to this profound integration. Their actions felt completely natural, entirely consistent with their deeply held sense of self.
And Colby and David make a really important point here, which is that a morally defined sense of self isn't one that's constantly characterized by sacrifice and deprivation. It's not about losing yourself.
No.
No, instead, actively helping others actually enhances that sense of self, leading to feelings of fulfillment and purpose. Doing good becomes a natural expression of who you are at your core, not something done out of obligation or external pressure.
That makes a lot of sense. Teske, in his research with contemporary activists, further reinforces this idea, stating that morality is fundamentally about the kind of person one strives to be, about how one chooses to live their life, rooted in a deep sense of self and the individual they aspire to become.
hmm So moral actions aren't just isolated heroic moments, but rather consistent outward expressions of an underlying moral identity. As Teskey observed, activism begets more activism, and activists often express sentiments like, I am doing this for me for the kind of person I want to be.
Wow, doing it for me. But this development of a strong moral identity doesn't happen in a vacuum, does it? Erickson talked about the fundamental need for young people to find an identity that is grounded in a respectable past and offers a hopeful vision for the future, providing a crucial sense of transcendent meaning and purpose.
That's absolutely right. Identifying with a religious or political ethos, with a collective entity that has a clear vision for the future and a connection to the past, provides that essential sense of transcendence.
A bigger picture.
Exactly.
Mm.
TIS connects this directly to the idea of activism, arguing that it places individuals within a larger historical narrative, giving their actions a broader significance beyond the immediate moment.
We saw this so powerfully with the civil rights activists who described feeling a direct connection to the history of struggle and resistance when they were fighting for voting rights. It wasn't just about the present day injustice, it was about being a part of a much larger story of progress and change.
Right. In the social justice course we discussed earlier, intentionally incorporated this element of transcendent meaning by drawing upon Catholic social teaching and the inspiring legacy of figures like Martin Luther King Jr., encouraging students to see themselves as continuing that ongoing struggle for a more just and equitable society.
Hmm.
Teskey's point about moral political action, fulfilling our deep-seated desire to become the person we aspire to be and to contribute meaningfully to history, really resonates here. And it all circles back to the foundational importance of those small, everyday moral experiences like serving the homeless, which foster the essential relationships of respect that underpin a strong moral identity.
It's actually quite encouraging, to look at the statistics on youth involvement in community service today. A significant percentage of high school students are regularly engaged in various forms of service.
That's true.
And these opportunities, often provided by organizations with clearly defined and meaningful ideologies, really do have the potential to cultivate these morally productive identities in young people.
However, it's also crucial to acknowledge that not all young people have access to these positive and identity-shaping experiences, and some may unfortunately be exposed to negative ideologies that promote intolerance and division.
Yeah, that's the other side of it.
Right. This reality underscores the significant responsibility of adults in society to actively provide opportunities that foster constructive identities grounded in empathy and respect, and to actively counteract the influence of harmful ideologies, drawing lessons from historical examples of both those who acted with profound courage and those who perpetrated great harm.
Ultimately, it seems the fundamental challenge for educators and communities is to intentionally create pathways for young people to build these strong and constructive identities, rooted in everyday morality, a deep sense of connection to others, and a commitment to the collective well-being of their communities.
So, as we bring our deep dive to a close today, the key insight is clear. Engaging in community service, particularly during our formative years, is far more than just performing good deeds. It's a really powerful and multifaceted process that actively shapes our core moral and civic identities. It achieves this by fostering fundamental relationships of respect with others, by connecting us to broader societal values and historical narratives, and by allowing us to see ourselves as capable and effective moral actors within a larger ideological context.
And as we've explored, this isn't about waiting for some grand heroic moment to define our character. It's about the accumulation of those everyday experiences, those seemingly small acts of kindness, empathy, and engagement that gradually solidify who we are and how we understand our place and responsibilities in relation to others and the communities we are a part of.
Yeah. This raises a really important and personal question for you, our listener. Take a moment to consider the everyday actions and affiliations in your own life, both past and present. How have these experiences, both big and small, shaped your own sense of responsibility and your understanding of your place within the larger community?
That's a good question to ponder.
Right. And regardless of your current age or stage of life, what opportunities do you have right now to actively engage in this everyday morality and further cultivate your own moral civic identity? It's a continuous journey of growth and self-discovery, and one that is profoundly worth reflecting upon.